some lives do not announce their importance while they are being lived. They move quietly through history, shaping moments, moods, and memories that only reveal their weight when they are gone. Today marks the passing of 4 Americans whose work touched politics, music, television, and childhood imagination, each in a different way, each with lasting impact. From the steady governance that shaped a state, to melodies that lived inside animated worlds, to performances that filled living rooms for decades, to rhythms that held together a cultural movement, these were lives defined by contribution rather than spectacle. This hour is not about headlines or noise. It is a moment of reflection, an honoring of endurance, craft, and the subtle ways influence lingers long after the final curtain. The news was confirmed quietly early in the day, as flags across New Jersey lowered in unison. Richard James Codey had died on January 11, 2026, at the age of 79. There were no dramatic announcements, only a shared sense that something steady had come to an end. For more than 50 years, Codey's name had been part of the state's political fabric. Not as a headline figure, but as a constant presence. In an era defined by rapid change and short careers, his life stood out for one reason above all else: he never left. Born on November 27, 1946, Richard Codey entered public life at a time when state politics moved slower and closer to home. He was first elected to the New Jersey Legislature in 1974, representing communities in Essex and Morris counties. From that first day forward, he served without interruption for 5 decades, becoming the longest-serving legislator in the state's history. Those who worked alongside him often described him as familiar before describing him as powerful. He knew the districts by memory, remembered names without notes, and carried stories from decades past into every new debate. One former colleague said, "Richard didn't treat politics like a ladder. He treated it like a responsibility you don't walk away from." As the years passed, Codey rose through the New Jersey Senate, earning respect not through force, but through reliability. He became Senate President in 2002, a role he would hold for many years. His leadership style was calm and direct, often avoiding grand speeches in favor of quiet negotiation. In 2004, the state faced sudden uncertainty when Governor Jim McGreevey resigned. Without ceremony or campaign, Codey was sworn in as the 53rd governor of New Jersey. It was not a moment he had sought, but one he accepted. Those close to the administration remember that transition as steady rather than dramatic. Codey approached the governor's office the same way he approached every role, with focus on the work, not the spotlight. A senior aide later recalled, "He didn't act like a new governor. He acted like someone filling in where the state needed him most." His time as governor lasted until 2006. It was not marked by sweeping reform or national attention, but by restoration. Trust was rebuilt. The tone of government softened. And when his term ended, Codey returned to the Senate without complaint or ego, resuming the work he had always done. Perhaps the most personal chapter of his public life came through his advocacy for mental health awareness. Long before such conversations were common in politics, Codey spoke openly about his own struggles with depression. He did so plainly, without scripted language or political polish. At a time when vulnerability was often seen as weakness, Codey reframed it as honesty. His efforts helped pass legislation supporting mental health services and encouraged public dialogue across the state. One mental health advocate wrote online after his passing, "He made it easier for people to speak. That matters more than people realize." For decades, Codey remained a fixture in Trenton. While administrations changed and political trends shifted, he stayed. Younger lawmakers often leaned on his institutional memory, seeking guidance not found in policy books. He had seen cycles repeat, mistakes return, and lessons forgotten. Despite his seniority, he resisted becoming distant. Constituents frequently noted that he answered his own phone and attended local events without press. A resident from his district shared, "You didn't feel like you were talking to a politician. You felt like you were talking to someone who knew the place." In January 2024, after 50 years of continuous service, Codey stepped away from the legislature. Even then, his departure was understated. There were no victory laps, only gratitude expressed quietly. His death 2 years later closed a chapter that stretched across generations. Tributes began appearing from across the political spectrum. The New Jersey State House observed a moment of silence. Messages described him as steady, kind, and deeply human. Governor statements spoke of stability. Former colleagues spoke of mentorship. Ordinary residents spoke of recognition, of being remembered. One longtime staffer said simply, "Richard Codey believed democracy was something you took care of every day. Not something you performed." In the end, his legacy is not defined by titles or terms, but by endurance. By showing up. By staying when others moved on. In a time when leadership often seeks attention, Richard J. Codey showed that consistency itself can guide a state. His absence leaves a quiet space in New Jersey politics, one shaped not by noise, but by memory. And in that space, his life continues to remind us that service, when carried without interruption, becomes its own form of leadership. The news surfaced softly, shared first in small circles, then quietly confirmed on January 8, 2026. Vernon Moon had passed away, leaving behind a body of work most people remembered by feeling rather than by name. He was born in 1962, entering the animation world at a moment when music was beginning to matter more than ever. Cartoons were no longer just bright images and fast jokes. They were becoming emotional spaces, and composers like Moon helped shape how those worlds felt. Moon's work lived inside shows that defined childhood for millions. The Fairly OddParents, Danny Phantom, and Johnny Test were loud, fast, and often chaotic on the surface. Beneath that energy was music that held everything together, guiding tone, timing, and emotion without asking for attention. His compositions were playful, but never careless. They knew when to rush forward and when to slow down. They carried humor without overpowering it, and emotion without spelling it out. Many viewers grew up hearing his music daily, never realizing the same creative voice was following them from episode to episode. Industry peers often described Moon as a composer who understood restraint. One fellow animator once said, "Guy knew when music should speak, and when it should simply listen." That balance became his signature, even if most audiences never learned his name. As animation evolved, so did his sound. Moon adapted to shifting styles and faster pacing, but his core approach stayed the same. Music was there to serve the story, not compete with it. It filled silence with meaning, not noise. For fans revisiting these shows years later, the recognition often comes suddenly. A melody plays, and something familiar settles in. It feels like home. Social media posts after his passing reflected that realization again and again. One fan wrote, "I didn't know who Vernon Moon was until today. But I've known his music my whole life." That sentiment echoed widely, shared by people who grew up alongside the shows he helped shape. Moon never chased the spotlight. He worked behind the scenes, contributing to a larger creative ecosystem where many voices blended into one experience. In animation, that harmony mattered more than individual credit. His passing was acknowledged without spectacle, much like the way he lived and worked. There were no major announcements, only quiet tributes from colleagues and longtime viewers. The absence felt subtle, but real. A former collaborator shared, "Guy cared deeply about the audience, especially kids. He wanted the music to feel safe, exciting, and honest." That care was woven into every score he wrote. What makes Moon's legacy unique is how deeply it is embedded in memory. His work does not stand apart from the stories it supported. It exists within them, inseparable from characters, jokes, and moments of wonder. children who watched those shows grew up. Some forgot episodes. Others moved on entirely. But the music remained, tucked away until it surfaced again years later, bringing back laughter, comfort, and a sense of time returned. In that way, Moon's influence was never fleeting. It matured alongside his audience. What once played in the background of after-school television now carries nostalgia, warmth, and emotional weight. His death marked the loss of a creative voice that helped guide an entire generation through imaginary worlds. Yet his work continues to play, unchanged, whenever those animated worlds are revisited. Vernon Moon did not just score television shows. He scored moments of growing up. And as long as those melodies continue to echo, so does his presence, quiet, steady, and forever part of childhood itself. The confirmation came quietly, without headlines or urgency. On January 9, 2026, it was shared that Thomas Kent Carter had passed away. For many, the news felt personal, even if his name did not come immediately to mind. He was one of those actors whose face lived comfortably in memory. Familiar, dependable, and present during countless moments of American television. Carter was born in 1956, stepping into Hollywood during a time when careers were built on consistency, not instant recognition. His early film work placed him inside stories that would later become cultural landmarks. Appearances in Corvette Summer, Southern Comfort, and The Thing connected him to projects remembered for decades. Though he was not the center of the spotlight, his presence added weight and realism to the worlds those films created. Carter never chased celebrity. Instead, he moved steadily through the industry, taking roles that demanded flexibility and quiet skill. Casting directors trusted him. Fellow actors respected him. He became the kind of performer productions relied on to make stories feel real. Television soon became the heart of his career. In the fast-growing world of network TV, Carter found his rhythm. He starred in Just Our Luck, carrying a leading role with ease and warmth. While the show's run was brief, his performance left an impression of sincerity rather than spectacle. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, his face returned again and again to living rooms across the country. On Punky Brewster and Good Morning, Miss Bliss, Carter fit naturally into family-centered storytelling. He played characters who felt present rather than performed, grounding lighter moments with emotional truth. One television producer later reflected, Thomas brought honesty to every role. You never felt like he was acting. You felt like he was listening. That quality defined his work, even as the industry around him changed. As television grew more complex, so did his roles. In later years, Carter appeared in The Corner, a series praised for its realism and emotional weight. His performance there showed a depth shaped by experience, carrying quiet intensity without excess. Audiences may not always have known his name, but they trusted his presence. He was the neighbor, the friend, the man whose story felt believable. In many ways, he represented the backbone of television itself. After his passing, tributes surfaced from viewers and colleagues alike. One longtime fan wrote online, "I didn't know his name, but I knew his face. And I always believed him." That recognition echoed across social media, simple and sincere. Another former co-star shared, Thomas showed up prepared, kind, and grounded. He made everyone else better by being steady. Those words captured the essence of his career. Carter's death marked the quiet loss of a working actor who helped define everyday storytelling. There were no dramatic farewell tours or grand ceremonies. Just remembrance. His legacy lives in reruns, streaming libraries, and memories formed during evenings spent in front of the television. Scenes where his presence made moments feel real. Stories strengthened by his restraint. In an industry often focused on stars, Thomas Kent Carter represented something just as important. Reliability. Humanity. The ability to support a story without demanding attention. And as those familiar episodes continue to play, his work remains where it has always been. Quietly present. Steady. And remembered, not by name alone, but by the feeling of having watched something honest. The confirmation arrived softly, carried through music circles and shared with care. In January 2026, Bob Weir passed away, and with him went a steady presence that had helped hold a generation together. Born in 1947, Weir came of age during a time of change. Music was no longer just entertainment. It was becoming a shared language. When he co-founded the Grateful Dead in the mid-1960s, few could have imagined what the band would become. The Grateful Dead grew into more than a group. It became a moving community, following its own rhythm across decades. Within that world, Bob Weir was not the loudest voice. He was the anchor. His role as rhythm guitarist gave shape to long, winding performances. While others explored open space, Weir provided structure. His playing allowed the music to wander without losing its way. Those close to the band often spoke of his balance. One longtime collaborator once said, "Bob was the glue. He kept the song standing when everything else was in motion." That quiet role defined much of his career. Weir's songwriting drew deeply from American roots. Folk, blues, and country influences ran through his work. He reshaped those sounds for a generation searching for freedom, but still holding on to tradition. Songs like his carried stories rather than spectacle. They felt lived in and shared. His voice was not polished, but it was honest, and audiences trusted it. Decades of touring followed. Night after night, the band changed, stretched, and reinvented itself. Creative tension was part of the process, but so was loyalty. Fans returned not for repetition, but for connection. When the Grateful Dead came to an end in 1995, it did not feel like a conclusion. It felt like a turning point. The music had taken on a life of its own. Weir continued forward, not to recreate the past, but to care for it. Projects like Rat Dog, Further, and later Dead and Company carried the spirit of the music into new years and new audiences. His role became one of stewardship rather than revival. A younger musician who played alongside him once shared, "Bob never tried to be larger than the music. He treated it like something you protect." That approach earned him respect across generations. His passing was met with quiet reflection. Tributes came not only from fellow musicians, but from fans who had followed the music for decades. One message read simply, "Thank you for holding the rhythm. We felt safe there." Bob Weir's legacy is not found in spotlight moments. It lives in endurance. In the way music can hold people together, even as the world shifts around it. He reminded audiences that rhythm is not background. It is foundation. And when it is gone, its absence is deeply felt. As the songs continue to play, and the community he helped shape carries on, Bob Weir remains present in every steady beat. A keeper of balance. A guide through change. And a rhythm that will not be forgotten.